My sister took the money I had saved over 4 years to buy herself an iPhone. When I questioned her, my parents told me that if I couldn't share, I should leave. They kicked me out, and no one contacted me for years. Now, 4 years later, she's sick, and her family is asking me to come help. But the last time I was with them, they destroyed any desire I had to return. The moment I understood that the house was no longer my home happened on a July afternoon. The air conditioner barely worked, and my work uniform was still damp with sweat. I had just come back from a morning shift at the diner, where I'd worked for nearly 4 years, serving coffee, cleaning the men's bathroom, and dealing with inappropriate comments from lonely truck drivers. I was 25, living with my parents and my younger sister, who was 3 years behind me. I had been saving every dollar I could to move out. I didn't spend on outings, clothes, or even repair my broken phone that shut off when held at the wrong point. Every bit of effort went into that savings account. It was small, but it was the only thing that kept me motivated. That day, I walked in and noticed my bedroom door was slightly open. That was strange. I always kept it locked. I instantly felt that something was wrong. When I stepped inside, my fear was confirmed. The drawer where I kept important papers and a notepad with my bank passwords was open, and everything inside was scattered. I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app, an account I had cried over because it took forever to get approved due to my lack of credit history. And there it was. My savings were gone. Not a single dollar left. It took seconds to see the transfer. The entire balance had been sent to an unknown account earlier that afternoon. My chest felt like it was tearing open. My hands shook, and I struggled to breathe. I stormed through the house looking for my sister. She was on the couch, laughing, showing my mother the brand new iPhone she had just bought. The latest model, still sparkling with the clear case. She said something like, "Look at this camera, Mom. It's crazy." I'm not sure what expression I had, but the moment they saw me, they both went silent. I didn't yell. I simply asked, "Where did you get the money for that?" Her answer was so casual that I wanted to rip the phone out of her hands. She told me she had used my savings and that I wasn't going to use them right away anyway. She didn't say it like she borrowed something. She said it like the money was hers to begin with. I turned to my mother, waiting for anger, discipline, or at least a sign that she recognized how serious this was. Instead, she raised an eyebrow and told me not to make a scene, because a good sister should know how to share. I laughed, dry, bitter, disbelieving. Then I told my sister that if she didn't return my money immediately, I would report her for theft. That's when my father walked in, with his typical irritated tone, asking what was happening. My mother explained it in her usual sweet voice she used to sway him. But he didn't need the full story. He scoffed and said something I will never forget. "If you don't know how to talk to your family, you can leave. We don't have room for selfish people here." I stared at them like they were strangers. It was hard to accept that they meant it, that in this family, an iPhone was worth more than years of my work. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed. My breath was tight, and my whole body shook with anger and humiliation. I checked my bank transactions again, hoping I was mistaken, but the numbers stayed the same. She had even used my social security number to set up Apple Pay. She didn't hide it at all. She knew my habits and where I kept everything. I walked to the bus station and got on the first bus I saw. I didn't care where it went. I didn't know if I'd find a job, end up homeless, or if anyone would help me. But I knew I had nothing left in that house. They took my money, yes, but they also took my trust and any belief that family meant something. That was the last time anyone heard from me for years. It has been a little over 4 years since that morning. I boarded a bus with nothing but my clothes and a mix of anger, fear, and exhaustion. During that entire time, no one looked for me. No messages, no calls, nothing. At first, I expected that. I won't lie. Every night I checked the prepaid phone I bought with the tiny amount I had left after weeks of staying in shelters and cleaning toilets for $10 an hour. I hoped my mother would realize what they'd done. I hoped my father would rethink. I hoped my sister would call out of guilt. But the phone stayed silent, as if I had never existed. Leaving without permission was apparently enough for them to erase me from the family entirely. The first few weeks were the hardest. I slept wherever I could and ate whatever I found. I took any job just to avoid the streets. I collapsed more than once. I ended up in the hospital due to dehydration. Another time, someone stole the backpack with my documents, and I spent 3 months trying to get new identification. I dealt with endless paperwork and people who treated me like I wasn't worth their time. But eventually, I climbed out of it. I held on to my pride like it was the only thing left. I told myself no one was coming to save me, so I had to save myself. And I did. I finally got a stable job at a diner in downtown Philadelphia. They didn't treat me like a servant. The supervisor was strict but fair, paid on time, and didn't let customers disrespect the staff. They gave me more shifts, and I took all of them. I saved every penny. I moved into a shared room with 4 other women, 3 of whom barely spoke English, but they didn't touch my things. I learned to cook on one hot plate, wash clothes by hand, walk everywhere to avoid transportation costs, and stretch every dollar. Life slowly shifted from constant punishment to something manageable. Then one day, unexpectedly, my phone rang. The ringtone was the same one I had heard hundreds of times, but this time it made me freeze. It was a number I recognized, my father's. I remembered it instantly, even though I had I didn't answer the call, not because I didn't want information, but because I couldn't bring myself to hear the same voice that years ago pushed me out of the house like I didn't belong there, like I didn't deserve food or a place to sleep. After years of working myself to exhaustion, that was the voice that had discarded me. He left a voicemail, but I didn't listen to it right away. Instead, I went into the diner restroom, washed my face, tied my hair back as if that could block the memories, and returned to work as though nothing had happened. But it wasn't nothing. I already knew this call wasn't out of affection. If they were reaching out after 4 years, it wasn't because they missed me. They wanted something. Later that night, lying under a bleach-stained blanket, I played the voicemail. His tone was the same as always, cold, dry, and trying too hard to sound caring. He said he needed to speak with me, that it was urgent, and that my sister wasn't well. He added that as a family, we should stay close during hard times. That was the exact phrase, difficult times. Hearing him say it made my stomach tighten with anger. Difficult times, that's what they decided to call the consequences of their actions. Life was returning everything they had done to me. I imagined his usual scowl, the same expression he used when he yelled at me for crying or told me to leave if I couldn't share. In the whole message, he never used my name. He didn't say daughter. He didn't apologize. He admitted nothing. Just, we have a problem. We need your help. That was when I understood they hadn't changed at all. They didn't want to know if I was alive, where I slept for 4 years, what I ate, or if I ever recovered from being abandoned. They wanted something from me again. They only reached out when their world was falling apart and assumed they could summon me like a tool. like something they owned, as if I owed them anything. I deleted the voicemail that night. I didn't respond. I didn't call back. I didn't give them any hint of where I lived. The next morning, I went to work like any other day, but something inside me shifted. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sadness. It was colder, more intentional. A thought was forming. It didn't have shape yet, but it was gaining strength. If they were going to look for me, they needed to understand I wasn't the same person. The next time they tried, they wouldn't find me broken, crying, or trying to justify myself. If they wanted me to come back, there would be a cost. Every dollar, every tear, every moment they made me feel unnecessary. In that quiet mix of pride and anger, the desire for revenge began to grow. The same revenge they planted the day they decided a phone was more valuable than their daughter. Update 2. It's been about 9 months since that first attempt to contact me. 6 months since my father's voicemail about tough times and the importance of family. I haven't heard from them since. No calls, no messages, no effort to find me. It was as if my silence was enough for them to just move forward, just like I did when I left that house with a backpack and $65 in my pocket. With them gone, I continued building my life. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I worked long hours at an empanada shop that hired me after the owner, a Dominican man with a short temper but incredible cooking skills, saw how accurately I organized orders at the cafe. He wasn't particularly kind, but he paid fairly, respected my schedule, trusted me to close the shop, let me manage the register, and even taught me how to mix dough by hand. He'd always say, "No shortcuts, do it the right way." That shop, with its smell of old grease and burnt flour, became part of my routine. One of the girls I worked with, who knew nothing about my past, mentioned something she read on a medical forum about a young woman with a serious kidney condition who urgently needed a transplant. At first, I didn't think much of it, but the comment lingered in my mind as I scrubbed the grills with a worn-out sponge. I remembered my father's strained voice months earlier, the urgency hiding behind his attempt to sound firm. On impulse, I went to the restroom, shut the door, and looked up my family's Facebook accounts, which I had promised myself never to check again. Their profiles still showed the usual smiling pictures, fake captions, and attempts to present a perfect family. But something on my sister's page stood out. She usually posted edited photos or copied inspirational quotes. Now there was a hospital picture, her pale, with dark circles under her eyes, wearing a medical gown and holding an IV. The caption said, "One day at a time, God is always with me." My fingers trembled, not out of sympathy, but from the realization that she was finally experiencing what it felt like to lose control, to depend on others to survive. Days passed the same way, work, home, work, home. But the thought didn't leave. Eventually, on a Tuesday night after closing the shop, still in my stained uniform, I went to a nearby free clinic. I told them I wanted routine blood work. They looked confused at first. I had no symptoms. But when I mentioned a sick family member and wanting to check donor compatibility, their attitude changed. They took my samples and asked if I wanted to join the donor registry. I agreed, but gave limited information. I used a different last name, my paternal grandmother's, along with a false address and a phone number I rarely used. 3 weeks later, they called. My blood type was a match. They didn't know for whom because the other patient wasn't in their system. but they said they would notify me if an external match appeared. I didn't say anything, but I knew instantly. It was Reagan, my sister. The same person who stole my savings, embarrassed me, and watched me walk out with a backpack while everyone stayed silent. And now she was running out of time with no donor available. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't really have anyone to tell. I held on to that information quietly, knowing that eventually it would matter. Meanwhile, I kept seeing indirect signs online. My mother, who never used Facebook in the past, was posting phrases like, "Family is everything," and "Forgiveness is stronger than pride." It disgusted me. I wanted to comment, to expose what they did, but I didn't. I was done with the chaos. My plan was different. I wasn't looking for apologies. I wanted them to feel the same emptiness they once forced on me, to understand what it's like to depend on someone you mistreated, to need something you cannot buy or fix with pretty words. So I did nothing. I didn't call. I didn't respond. I didn't step forward and say, "I can help," not because I couldn't, but because I no longer wanted to. When they threw me out, they didn't care if I survived. Now I finally had a choice, and I decided that if they ever wanted anything from me, it would happen only on my terms, when I chose, not when they needed it. In that quiet waiting, I began planning the first stage of my revenge. Because they still assumed I was the same girl who would respond to the word family like it meant something. But now, I was the one with the power, real power. And if I learned anything in those 4 years, it's that you don't flaunt power. You hold it calmly, with the certainty of someone who no longer fears falling. After losing everything, the only option left was to push back with equal or greater strength. And that was exactly what I intended to do. Update 3. It had been a little over 13 months since I last heard anything meaningful from them. For an entire year, silence became my routine, this time acting as a shield instead of a punishment. A year without family issues allowed my life to slowly rebuild. I finally moved out of that cramped shared room where dignity barely existed. Now I had my own small studio apartment, simple but decent, in a part of Philadelphia that didn't smell like damp walls or sadness. At the shop where I worked, I was no longer just the person closing shifts. I had essentially become the owner's right-hand woman. He taught me how to handle accounting, negotiate with suppliers, deal with inspectors, and run a business without owing anyone anything. He never said it outright, but he trusted me enough to tell me, in his firm and blunt way, that if I ever wanted to start my own venture, he would help fund part of it. I didn't say it aloud, but it was one of the few times I felt someone genuinely believed in me, without manipulation or emotional strings. Around this time, I decided to follow the goal I'd had since moving here, starting my own business. I had no contacts, no reputation, and barely enough to survive, but I was determined to build something of my own and prove to myself that I could create it from nothing, with hard work and a mind full of numbers. I launched a small food truck selling smoked brisket sandwiches, parked near the community college. In the beginning, I only made enough to cover gas and meat for the day. But slowly, thanks to word of mouth and my constant push to improve everything, the line grew. Students, office workers, construction crews, even a few police officers chose my garlic fries over the convenience store donuts. I became a familiar part of the area. For the first time in years, I could say that what I had truly belonged to me, even if I didn't have a dollar to spare. I wasn't relying on anyone. No one could take it away. Just when life started to feel stable, a new letter arrived. This time, it wasn't a voicemail or a passive-aggressive online message. It was an official letter, addressed with my full legal name, and sent to an address only someone who searched deeply would know. The sender was a law firm. I remember staring at it with a mix of surprise and annoyance. I opened it inside the food truck while the ribs cooked. The paper was thick and formal, written in legal language that wasn't easy to follow, but the meaning was clear. My parents were trying desperately to save the house, the same house we grew up in, the same house they threw me out of. It turned out my sister's illness had drained all their savings. Treatment, dialysis, medication, care, transportation, hospital stays. They had mortgaged every corner of that place, and now the bank was demanding payments they couldn't meet. They needed a cosigner or guarantor, and for one obvious reason, they thought of me. I sat in the back of the truck holding the letter in one hand and a cigarette in the other. I laughed, not a joyful laugh, but a dry, empty one that almost hurt. It felt surreal, because that house, now their last piece of pride, had always felt like a burial ground for me. The place where they dismissed my feelings, degraded me, and told me I wasn't worth more than a device. And now they had the nerve to ask me to save it, to protect it, as if it had ever protected me. I didn't answer right away. I fought carefully, not because I was torn, but because I realized this could be the opportunity I had been waiting for. A way to settle every debt without speaking a single word. So a few days later, I hired a lawyer, an experienced, sharp woman who didn't care about family conflict. I explained exactly what I wanted. She would negotiate on my terms without giving up anything. And every part of the agreement needed to reflect the position I now held. I wanted the house transferred into my name. I wanted them out within 30 days. I wanted them to leave everything behind, the loan, the bills, the repairs, because I would handle all of it, but only if they disappeared. No contact, no requests, no attempts to reach out. And they needed to accept that if I saved that house, it was because it became mine, not because I cared about their situation. They agreed. They signed. ... In less than a week, my lawyer contacted me to say they had accepted everything without resistance. From their expressions, it was clear they had run out of options. The fear of losing their home mattered more than whatever pride they had left, and that was enough for me. Not out of cruelty, but because they finally understood what it felt like to be on the side with no power, looking at someone who holds what you need and asking for something you no longer have the right to request. They handed me the keys as though they were delivering a consequence. Their heads lowered, avoiding eye contact, saying nothing. I didn't hug them. I didn't speak. I simply took the keys, signed my part of the agreement, and left. When I returned to the house months later, the smell was unchanged, a mix of stale air, cheap perfume, and old dust. I walked through every room. My sister's room looked exactly the same. Mine was completely empty, as if I had never lived there. But this time, it didn't affect me. Things had shifted. I was in control now, and I had no intention of stepping back. I placed an under-renovation sign on the door, hired contractors, and began turning the property into an Airbnb, not mainly for profit, though the income would help, but for a deeper reason. That house had always represented pain, rejection, and being pushed aside. That particular Saturday had already started badly. The food truck had a broken pipe. A supplier didn't show up. A customer yelled about too many onions on her sandwich, and a lingering backache made everything worse. I had no energy left for unexpected situations, especially one like the one that followed. Around 3:30 p.m., while I was on the truck's floor trying to fix a rusted hose, someone knocked hard and repeatedly on the back door. I assumed it was an impatient customer who didn't understand that without smoke, there's no food. But it wasn't. It was my mother, standing there as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't thrown me out over 4 years ago, as if she hadn't removed me from their lives for protecting my own savings, as if I hadn't been treated like a problem they wanted gone. She looked different, thinner and more tired. Her swollen eyes made it obvious she hadn't slept well. But I wasn't fooled. I knew how she operated. She had been skilled at it since I was a child. She wanted something. I recognized it the moment she spoke in a shaky, fragile voice. I didn't invite her in. I didn't even let her step past the doorway. She pressed her hands against the metal frame and said she needed to talk, that it was urgent, and that it concerned my sister. I stood still, waiting for her to say what she had clearly rehearsed. She said my sister was nearing the end, that the doctors believed she had only a few weeks left, that she was declining faster than expected, her body failing, and that her final request was to see me, to talk to me, and tell me something before she passed. My mother looked directly at me and pleaded, as if asking for something sacred. Please don't deny her last wish. I don't fully understand what happened in that moment, because against every logical thought, against everything I had promised myself for years, that I didn't want to see them again, that I owed them nothing, that their suffering wasn't my responsibility, I said yes. I agreed to go, not out of mercy or reconciliation. I went because I knew whatever happened in that room wouldn't be about healing old wounds. It would be about finally closing them for good, finishing a story that had never given me peace. And, though I didn't want to admit it, I wanted to look her in the eyes. I wanted to see if, with no excuses left and no time to hide behind, she would finally acknowledge what she had done. I removed my work gloves, shut down the truck, and told my mother to wait outside while I drove. We didn't speak during the car ride. She cried quietly. I held the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The hospital was one of those cold, sterile places with long white hallways and fluorescent lights that make you feel worse just by being there. We checked in at the front desk, walked in silence, and reached the floor where my sister was staying. My mother hurried ahead, as if she still needed to take charge. I paused before entering the room. I took a manila envelope out of my bag, put everything inside it back in order, and then stepped in. I saw her. She was lying there, almost unrecognizable. Deep, dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, and a frail body that looked as though it had been deteriorating from the inside. She looked at me as if she wasn't sure I was actually there. Her lips moved, trying to say my name. I reminded her she knew exactly what she had done, that it wasn't a mistake. She laughed straight at me while doing it, and she allowed me to walk out of that house hungry, cold, and scared. Not once did she think of calling me. This was never about the phone or the money. It was about what it represented. The betrayal, our parents' involvement, and the way they treated me like a burden, as if my only value was whatever I could provide financially. My mother tried to cut in. She raised her voice, saying something like, "Stop, please, she's dying." But I looked at her with a calm coldness I didn't know I had, and reminded her that the last time I stood in that home, she told me that if I couldn't share, I should leave. So that's what I did. I left and learned how to survive without them. Now it was their turn to do the same. And if the silence bothered them, it was the same silence they had forced on me for years. I stayed in the room for another minute, looking at my sister, the person who had taken my savings, my place in the family, and who could barely sit up in that bed. I didn't feel sympathy, pity, or anger, just a strange sense of resolution, as if I had finally settled something long overdue. I walked out of the room without turning back. I continued down the bright hallway, stepped into the parking lot, got into my car, and drove off. I didn't cry. My hands didn't shake. I simply took a long breath, the kind someone takes when releasing a weight they've carried for far too long. I knew this moment wouldn't fix anything or return the years I had lost, but it belonged to me. It was my way of closing the loop and making it clear that there was no return. Family is built on loyalty, and they had shown me none. Maybe now they understood what it felt like to lose something, what it felt like to need someone who was no longer within reach. After 4 years of waiting for them to recognize me, I finally walked away with the few things they had left: their regret, their tears, and a manila envelope full of bills. 6 months passed after that last visit to the hospital. 6 months with no new calls, messages, or attempts to sway me. It seemed they finally realized the door they slammed years ago no longer existed, and that whatever remained of the family had faded long before anyone else did. During that time, I continued converting the house into an Airbnb. I hired a renovation crew, practical designers, and slowly removed every part of the place that had ever made me feel small. I took down the framed family photos, full of forced smiles. I removed the dusty curtains that hung like leftover reminders of the past. I made sure each space felt renewed, separate from the version of me that once lived there. I changed the locks, repainted the entire exterior, and treated every detail as if I were cleaning more than a property. I was clearing out an entire history. The day I published the listing online felt like a symbolic ending. The description was simple: a fully updated family home in a quiet area, ideal for extended stays, full of character, privacy guaranteed. I smiled as I wrote it, knowing future guests would never know what the house had meant or what had happened there. And I wasn't going to explain it because it no longer had any hold over me. Now it was just a business, steady income, and a profitable asset. Each time a new booking came in, it reminded me of everything they had lost by assuming I was replaceable. My sister passed away a few weeks after that visit. I found out through a Facebook post with an old photo of her, edited with angel wings and a decorative "Rest in Peace" message. I didn't feel relief, grief, or closure. I just read it, noted it, and went back to work. A customer from the food truck had reached out for a catering quote, and I needed to calculate the numbers. I didn't attend the funeral, didn't bring flowers, didn't sign any condolence book, and naturally, didn't reply to my mother's text 2 days later. "We want to see you. We miss you. Your sister always kept you in her heart." I didn't answer. Instead, I took a screenshot of the Airbnb listing, highlighted the contact number, and sent her the link with a short note. You can schedule a stay. High season pricing. No discounts. With that simple, direct message, I clarified what they never understood. They could no longer reach me. They once denied me access, and now the place belonged to me. If they wanted to step inside, they would have to pay for every night, both literally and figuratively. People ask whether I regret it, whether part of me wishes I had tried to resolve things, find closure, or repair what was broken. I always give the same answer. You can't rebuild something that was never stable to begin with. What broke between us wasn't about a phone or money. It was about what those actions revealed. I was never seen as important. My work meant less than convenience. My dignity was negotiable, as long as I didn't disturb their comfort. They pushed me out as if I were disposable, expecting I'd return later to rescue them. But I wasn't made to clean up anyone else's damage. I was meant to create my own future. Even if frustration pushed me forward, and even if walking alone for years left me worn out. Today, I reinvest every dollar I earn from that property. I have opened a second food truck. I'm considering a permanent location, and whenever I drive by the neighborhood where I grew up, I do it without looking down or feeling fear, because now I'm the one who holds the keys. They taught me that family doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it is what pushes you toward the lowest point. They also taught me that if you climb out, life can open like a healed wound. In my case, that wound turned into a business, stability, and independence. The same strength they tried to crush when they sent me away with nothing. So no, I haven't returned to that family, and I don't plan to. The last time I tried to be a daughter, a sister, or part of something, they took away my will to live. Now, I have become everything they never expected. Someone who survived and learned that the best form of payback isn't a dramatic moment. Sometimes it's quiet. It's succeeding.